I check my equipment. We're good. Okay, it was in 2023 that I met Aaron. It's an interesting conversation. I saw the girl, she was working in Safeway in Spearfish. And I said to her, "You look familiar. Have we met before?" She says, "I don't think so." I said, "Did you go to church in town? Maybe I saw you there." She said, "No, I stopped going to the Roman Catholic Church because I'm trans woman, presenting as a man." And I said, "Well, what's that mean?" She said, "Well, I'm a woman who feels more comfortable living as a man." And I says, "Well, that's interesting. When did that start in life?" She said, "Well, I was 15 and I was going through a lot of emotional stuff. I read this book." Hold on, I gotta back up. She says, "I read a book and the book's name is This Book is Gay." That was the name of it. I didn't give it the title. And she says, "And it explained my feelings. I started to transition to be a man and I felt much better." And then I asked her, I says, "Well, would it be true to say that at 15 you started to have strong feelings that you might be a man? You read a book that said those feelings mean you're a man and you started acting like a man and you felt much better?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "What does a man feel like?" And that kind of set her back a little. She says, "I don't really know." I says, "Have you ever had strong feelings about something in your life that you made a decision on and you felt you were doing the right thing, but later you found out your feelings misled you?" And she says, "I have." She says, "That's what I'm going through at the moment." She says, "I'm questioning if my feelings are wrong, and that's what's holding me back from having the next step, which is surgery." I said, "There, as Christians, we don't look at you as your sex. We look at you as a very special and significant person. And have you ever considered that your possible 80 years on the planet is not all that you're made for?" She says, "Sometimes I think there's something after this life. Sometimes I think it's just black." Said, "Would it make any difference in your situation if your life on this planet just was a spark in the eternal fire that you're made for eternity, not 80 years on the planet?" And she kind of stopped and she went silent. You could see her thinking. And she says, "What would that look like?" I said, "Well, that's a good question." I said, "We need more time to talk about it." I said, "Why don't you come along to church on Sunday and we'll talk more?" She asked me what time we started at. I gave her the 9:30, which is a total lie. Said the 9:30, 11-ish. I says, "Then we eat together afterwards." And I says, "You'd be welcome to come and eat with us. And even if you can't come to worship, just come and eat." And she said she'd think about it. That was the conversation. Going on 3 years later, never seen her. I will tell you this, she knew she was loved, and she was loved by God's people. And the biggest issues in her life were being addressed. See, listen to me. Transgenderism, however you want, whatever you want to call it, is demonic. It's from the devil. It's satanic. It's a lie that tries to undermine the foundational truths of reality. And we can never subscribe to that lie because we will have given our minds away. So transgenderism is demonic, but transgender people are not. They're not. And it's in jugular importance that we never forget that. It's important that we differentiate between the satanic lie and those who are victims of that lie. Transgender people are made in the image of God, but they're lost. They've been taken captive by the lies of the devil, and we can see the results in their lives. They don't need to be hated. They don't need to be ostracized. They don't need to be persecuted. They need to be pitied. They need to be loved. And above all, they need to be rescued from the lie by the gospel and the gospel of Christ and the power of Christ. If we do not think we can win these people, we have no understanding of the gospel. Paul writes to the Corinthians, some of you were homosexual offenders. The important word there is were homosexual offenders. They weren't after they heard the gospel, were baptized and became Christians, rose to walk in newness of life. We can't forget these things. If we start putting X's through people that cannot be reached for Christ, we're going to lose this thing. But what was at the heart of Aaron's problem? What was the real issue with the girl? An identity problem. She had an identity problem. This girl literally didn't know who she was. And she was in emotional, mental, and physical chaos in all of her life because she didn't know who she was. Do you know there's three questions that all of us have to answer in life, or our lives will be in chaos? The first one is, who am I? The second one is, why am I here? And the third one is, what happens when I die? They're all interconnected like a chain, and all of them have to be answered. If you do not have the right answers for these questions, your life is in chaos. Who am I? Why am I here? And what happens when I die? Now, what's the problem with not knowing who you are? Let's address the first one. If you don't know who you are, someone else gets to define who you are. And that means they can control you. There's been a concerted effort in this country since the 1960s and probably into the early 50s to try to redefine what the United States of America is. The national identity of the people here has been attacked. It's been undermined. It's been subverted. The message you're being told now is if you're Scots, Irish, American, if you're Italian descent, if you're Polish, if any of you that came here from Europe, you're all a bunch of racist slave holders who hate people, especially if you're a Christian. Especially if you're a Christian. That is redefining who you are in an effort to control you. So you have to know who you are. And the whole game is to demolish this country and rebuild it as some kind of communist utopia. So it's awfully important to know who you are. Secondly, what's the problem with not knowing why you're here? This affects your life in huge ways. You ever got hired on at a job? You went to the interview, they really liked you, they thought you were wonderful. For some reason, you decide to take this minutiae of money that they were going to pay you to show up and give up your life to work there. Then you get to the job, and when you get to the job, nobody tells you what you have to do. You ever been there? That's a horrible feeling. It's terrible. You kind of start like moving around like this, and you look for someone in authority, and you can't find that one. Then some guy starts telling you what to do, and he's not your boss. So now you know you're doing his job. After 3 weeks, this guy's sitting, smoking, eating a sandwich. Yeah, clean that up too. It's a horrible feeling. You don't know what you're supposed to do. It really makes you unstable if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. You start asking the question, what's the point of this? When it comes to life, is it all about gathering money? Everybody else seems to be gathering money, and then you start piling up on that stuff, and then you realize, hold on a minute, I'm going to die. Somebody's going to get my big pile of money. That doesn't make any sense. Well, others say it's all about having fun. And the minute you're partying it up, and I did it, you're drinking it up, and next thing you're seeing people who are lying by the side of the road, lives destroyed with alcohol, they're putting needles in their arms on drugs, or on the pipe, they're doing all of these kinds of things, and you're like, wow, this stop being fun. You need to know why you're here. Or you end up asking the question, what's the point of me being here at all? I have to say that the suicide rate in this country is probably for that reason. They're suffering. Why go through it if there's no point to it? Third one is, what's the problem with not knowing what happens when you die? Because that's huge. I know I'm going. We all know we're going. I need to know where I'm going to. I need to know what happens next. Because if I don't, the Hebrew writer says this, Hebrews 2:14, inasmuch as the children have partakers of flesh and blood, he himself, talking about Christ, likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and release, listen to this, 15, release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subjected to bondage, enslaved by the fear of death. I know a lot of people in my home country, big, hard men, big, tough guys, street brawlers and fighters, fear to nothing, fear to nobody. And they're in this country too, want to tell you they're not afraid of death. Liars. 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 I've met them. I've sat with them. I fought with them in the streets. But the minute you bring up the topic of death with them, those guys will melt on you. They don't want to talk about it. They're not afraid of it, but it's the last subject they're going to discuss with you. And the minute they start feeling this strange palpitation in their chest, they're off to the doctor. Oh, help me, doctor. Help me, doctor. Oh, I thought you weren't afraid. I'll tell you, everybody's afraid of it. And if you don't have that question answered, where you're going to live the rest of your life like a basket case. Because it's coming. It's coming. All the big questions we have to answer in life are answered by Jesus Christ. All of them. Who am I? Why am I here? And what happens when I die? In Ephesians, and we're going to be in Ephesians over the next couple of months, we're studying it Wednesday nights, as you know. Please continue to read the book, 15 minutes of your life well spent. Church in Ephesus were living in a culture very much like ours, and they had all of these questions. Absolutely all of them. And Christ, through Paul, writes to them to answer the questions that we're talking about today. Who am I? Ephesians chapter 1, verse 1. I think Mike read this for us this morning, verses 1 through... Let me just pick out some of that text with you. Verse 1, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, by the will of God, to the saints who are in Ephesus. Verse 4, just as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy. Verse 15, therefore I also, after I heard of your faith in the Lord Jesus and your love for all the saints. And then verse 18, the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of his calling, what are the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints. 9 times in the book, Paul refers to the Christians as saints. The Greek word here is hagioi. The word holy and saint are intimately connected. So when it comes to who you are as a Christian and who I am as a Christian, we need to think of the word saint, the word saints, the holy. The word simply means this: that which is chosen by God and set aside for a purpose. All of the instruments in the temple, sacrificial instruments, were holy to the Lord. They were all set aside for God's purposes in the worship. And now it's no longer physical instruments, physical tools that would be used at the temple or in the tabernacle that is holy to the Lord, but people. Christian, that's what you are. You are holy to the Lord. You're set aside for a purpose. You are God's child. You are God's child and loved by God. And that's regardless of what's happening in the world around us. How's it looking out there for you? How does this world look at the moment? Could it get any more chaotic? I think it could. I don't know what it's coming, but it's chaotic at the moment. But remember this. Remember who you are. You are God's child, God's instrument, set aside for his purpose in this world. And if we know anything about what belongs to God, he watches over it. One of the Babylonian kings got full of himself, was out with his boys one night partying at the palace. They'd taken the sacred objects from the temple, the cups and all the gold and silver that was there, and they decided that they were going to have a drinking party. And he says, go get the cups from the temple. Let's drink with them. So they're all sitting getting hammered. And suddenly a hand appears on the wall and starts to write, Tekel, Tekel, remember the Chaldean here, Un Parson. The king sees it, he's shaking. A hand from no more writes it on the wall. No one can interpret it. They get Daniel in. Daniel comes in and turns around to him and says, "You've been weighed in the balance and found wanting." That means you're done, buddy. It's over for you. He put his hand on that which was holy to the Lord. And the Lord leveled him. That night, Cyrus the Great arrived and took over the whole kingdom. Remember who you are, regardless of what's happening on the ground. You're God's. You're holy. You're saints of the Lord. And He takes care of His own. So don't be afraid. Now, why are we here? We're here for God's redemptive mission. We're here, this is important, to enjoy the good life that God has given us. He gives us everything for our enjoyment. If you can get your hands on a T-bone steak with all those nice garlic potatoes on the side, maybe some asparagus, not overly cooked, I don't like it mushy, some nice mashed potatoes, and I like the skins on in the mashed potatoes, made with good Irish butter, of course. If you can get that, eat it and enjoy it. It's all from God. All of these blessings are from God. We're here to enjoy the good life He's provided for us. But we're not here in a playground. Just to go around in a playground when the world is falling apart, stuffing ourselves with all the good things God has given us and going to heaven when we die. We're here to fight evil. We're on a mission to redeem mankind. We're continuing the work by Christ and through Christ that He completed on the cross. That's why you're here. That's why you're breathing. That's why you wake up every morning at God's leave to fulfill this mission. The mission is not to go to church. I love that. Isn't that music to our ears? We've been led to believe the mission is to go to church, and if you don't show up, we're going to put the screws on you from the pulpit, a little bit of guilt here, a little bit of guilt there, lashings of guilt at home from your parents. The mission is not to go to church and do a ritual and take a piece of cracker and some fruit of the vine, and it's not to be a good person. And you know what? That's good news for me, because I'm not. I'm not. Can you look in the mirror and honestly say, good person? Can you? So we can all lay that nonsense down, right? I want to be. I want to be. I really, and when I don't want to be, I want to be. But I'm not. So the mission is not for me to be a good person and go to heaven when I die. They're milling them through these buildings, telling them this stuff, milling them through a religious mill of people being told, come to church, be a good person, you get to go to heaven when you die. It's not what the apostles preached. Christ didn't even hint in that direction. And thank goodness. It's not about church. Man, wow. I can loosen up a bit. I can move on from that. But we can't forget the nature of this mission. We can't forget who we are. We can't forget why we're here. We can't forget this mission. But lastly, we can't forget where we're going when we die. We can't forget the destination. And listen, it's not about dying and floating around in clouds, beating harps for eternity, and in an eternal church service Everybody's wearing white. I'm looking at Dal. Is that Dal? Is he's looking at me? Is that me? I don't know who Adam really is. He's got a big white beard now. It's glowing. Oh, it's not that. It's not that. It's never be that. That would be hell. If anything would be hell, it'd be that. We've got to move on from the medieval paintings and confront what Jesus talks about. 1 Corinthians 6, 1 through 3. This is my third point, and I've got a short conclusion, so bear with me. 1 Corinthians 6, 1 through 3. The church in Corinth are a mess. They are an absolute mess. Read the letter, First Corinthians, and think, wow, who wants to go to that church? And we don't know. Most of you know what they were getting up to. The 1 Corinthians 6, 1 through 3, they're in a mess. And Paul writes to them. He says this, they're arguing amongst each other at this time. I've got to give you the context. They're arguing amongst each other at this time to the point where they're going to law against one another. And they're bringing unbelievers in. So now this Christian community is known in the community as people who sue one another. That's good for the gospel. That's first class. Good plan, guys. We got to win this world for Christ, and they think we hate one another and are prepared to go to law. Paul has to remind them who they are. 1 Corinthians 6, 2 through 3. Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? If the world will be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Do you know that we shall judge angels? How much more then the things that pertain to this life? Did you catch what he said there? Don't go over this too quickly. Listen to what Paul says. Do you not know that the saints, that's the hagioi, the holy, those set aside by God for a purpose in this world, will judge the world? Judge the world? What does that mean? It means the wickedness of mankind. So you mean that at the end of this mission, when Christ sums the whole thing up, when he comes in judgment, there's a resurrection, we will be raised from the dead, immortals, and be judging the world? Yes. Well, I really don't think I should be doing that. That's what God says you're going to be doing. But not only that, listen to what else he says. Do you not know, verse 3, that we shall judge angels? Angels? We're going to participate in the judgment of angelic beings? Absolutely. It lines up with all kinds of scripture. Listen to Revelation 24, 20, verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus, for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or its image, and had not received his mark on their forehead or on their hand. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years, but the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Over such death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him for 1,000 years. How does that apply to us? Whatever it means. And Revelation is apocalyptic language. This is vision language. Of course, there's a meaning behind it, and we could explore it. We don't have the time. But I'll tell you, whatever this means, it means a radical change in your status and our status and our meaning and the authority that we have. Someone says, well, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. No, you're not. No, you're not. The Bible never speaks that way. Of course, sinners are saved by grace, but I'm just a sinner saved by grace. You're changing your identity. Well, I'm just a struggler trying to make it one day at a time. No, you're not. Of course you are. But that's not who you are. That's not who you are. And there's people running around saying, well, we're trying to restore New Testament Christianity. Wrong answer. Zero scripture speaks to that. Well, we're trying to live according to the scriptures. No, no, no. That's not who you are. That's not how God describes you. You're being prepped to be a judge of the world. You come in here today and thought, I'm getting $15, $17 an hour. I'm making $30 in tips here. You just got promoted today. That's not you. You're getting prepared to be a judge of the world and of angels. You got to feel better about that. Went from $17 an hour to judging humanity and angelic beings. That's an up, right? That makes you more important than you could ever imagine. Well, that can't be me, and so Christ says you are. Not me, so he says you are. I'm going to wrap her up here. It's awfully important that we remember who we are. We're children of God. We're holy to the Lord. That which is holy to the Lord, he watches over and takes care of. Once we grasp that, we can navigate our way through this chaos. As long as we remember why we're here. We're on a mission. The mission is to save humanity while we enjoy the good things God has given. And lastly, we must remember the destination. The destination. It's not floating on clouds. It's not beating the harps. It's not an eternal church service. We're being prepped to judge mankind. We're being prepped to judge angels. We're being prepped for a new heaven and earth when this whole thing is wrapped up. And we're going to raise from the dead. We're going to be immortals. In a body just like the Christ's. Immortals. Immortal. Immortal. Think about it. Think about it. We're going to be immortals in a new heaven and earth. And Christ, this has been God's defined plan from the beginning. Christ gave us the supper to bring us back to who we are, why we're here, and what happens when we die. This is why this all revolves around the cross. It all revolves around his sacrifice for us, our salvation by his grace, but it all speaks to his resurrection. And ultimately, it speaks to our resurrection too. Bow with me, please.